Hi, I'm Dean Bushmiller with Expanding Security, and this is Voice over IP. Now, if you're not seeing the full version of this video, you can go to expandingsecurity.com, where you can also get quizzes, glossaries, readings, and this mind map with all the dynamic links. Use or consumption of this material by AI is expressly forbidden. Let's get started. Voice over IP. Now, I'm an old guy. I mean, how old is an old guy? Well, I have one of these. And if you listen really carefully, you can hear those little, those things were to help the physical switches in the voices, on the voice relays for all the stepping switches for all the telephones to work, okay? Well, I can't even get service for this thing. So the olds said, hey, we've got these enterprise voice systems out there. Now, the leader 20 years ago was Nortel. They were the PBX leader out there. That's private branch exchange leaders out there. This was not IP based. What we needed was a way to transfer a call from one place to another. Calls originally cost 10 cents to transfer from one location to another. And so these PBX systems came along and said, you know what, we won't tell somebody to call somebody else. We'll just transfer that through and we'll take care of that. And so we had this automated call distribution for these call centers, but we also have it inside of the call center so that we can say, somebody can pick up the phone and say, yes, I can help you on customer service. We were allowed to do remote transfer with these very expensive PBX systems. I will tell you that these were, they use the same language that we do in security and in communications networks, but they didn't mean the same things. They were very, very different. So what happened was business came along and said, you know what, we've got an idea. It was a bad idea. Since voice is just another protocol, let's convert it to an application and run it over the network that we already have. And why was it a bad idea? Well, because the people who built PBX systems realized all that call forwarding, call management, auto attendant stuff, all those things that we now take for granted took a lot of configuration in order to protect the network, because there was this problem which was called toll fraud. In toll fraud, you knew you had a problem. Now, it used to be when you got your telephone bill in the enterprise, it would come on sheets of paper and you'd have like 20 calls on a sheet. In the enterprise, we would get a box, and that box was a very long box, and that would get handed to you, and you'd go through that and you'd go ahead and make sure that those were valid calls. In the days where you said, this is not a business call, this is not a business call, you have to pay for those particular things. You knew you were in trouble. You knew that you misconfigured your PBX system that would allow people to steal, toll fraud. They would steal your communications through a variety of things that they would do. They would steal your communications. You knew you had a problem when the telephone company bill was delivered by your mailman on a hand truck. And I have seen an out of control bill. Now, the problem with that is you get handed a $500,000 bill when you're normally used to a $50,000 bill. Telephone company says, pay it or go out of business because we're not going to let you do anything. And so we didn't like that. We didn't like any of those things. We didn't want to go ahead and solve it. We didn't want to go and deal with any of those problems. So what we did is we said, we'll just turn it into an application, because how expensive can it be? There's problems with that. And we'll discuss them later on. But for now, let's think about what VoIP is. VoIP is an alternative to the public switch telephone network, which still exists today, and we use it quite often. It allows us to do multimedia communication. It has standards from the IETF and the ITU, but there's also a lot of non-standards vendor-specific protocols out there. The leader in the market, because Nortel is now gone, is usually Cisco or Avaya or somebody like that. VoIP is not, okay? Now, certain things it's not. It's not one protocol or one service. You can't just turn it into one thing, and that was the mistake that businesses made. It's going to use separate paths for signaling and for media. It's different. It's got multiple protocols that we have to deal with. So let's look at some of those components here. First, on the client side of things, it's now a laptop with speakers, it's a mobile phone, or it's a handset like this, and this is an old Cisco phone. The great thing about this phone was that, well, it had power if you needed the power, but you could run power over Ethernet. But you could plug the wall jack into the back of here, and then you can plug your computer into this other interface on the other side. So it was all Ethernet based. So you'd have a handset. Now you could also do that over like a mobile phone if you wanted to. The next piece to this was a private branch exchange. This was, well, let's talk about what it is today. It's typically something like Asterisk or free PBX. It could be in a cloud image. It could be distributed in the cloud. You can purchase it as a service. You can get unified communications from Cisco, and you get these boxes that you drop in, which are basically very fancy computers with some other stuff that we'll talk about in a bit. The protocols that you're going to be introduced to here are things like, for Asterisk, they have the IAX, and that has low overhead, which is only 4 bytes, and it does NAT and PAT traversal capabilities. Some other protocols do not, and that's the big choice when we're dealing with Asterisk. That's why we choose Asterisk. There are plenty of different software that you can deploy, but most of it's custom, and that one happens to be open source. SIP, Session Initiated Protocol. It is text-based in nature. It runs over HTTP, and if you look at it and you were looking at it unencrypted, you could reassemble a conversation. You could listen in on something. Now we have encryption around that, but realize that that's one of the things that we start off with. We have the H.323, and that allows us to do peer-to-peer call control, where I can say, okay, we've got all this stuff that sets us up, but now when we're communicating, we can talk back and forth to each other. We can put each other on hold on our own phones, and we can end the calls there and then stop that call from working. That's the H.323. There's also an IP media gateway. This goes from our legacy circuit switch technologies, allows us to connect over. So if you have live phone lines inside of your organization where they're coming in on the small RJ11 jack, well, we need a way to transfer from one to the other. We need to be able to get to that packet switch technologies, and that's the media gateway that we use. We'll talk about those protocols in a little bit. From an infrastructure standpoint, you're going to need virtual local area networks. You're going to have to segregate this traffic because it is sensitive. We need to do quality of service configurations. And in a lot of cases, when we have these devices right now, we need to supply them with power. Now, this one happens to have power on the back side of it, but we inject that power in most telephones today, and we inject that through power over Ethernet. Some technical factors when you're deciding whether you're going to deploy voice over IP. Now, you probably already are, but it might be you're in an older company where they say, no, we use hard lines all the time. So if you're told that you have to deploy this, some of the technical factors that you have to consider are the codec selection, the bandwidth efficiency, the voice quality, whether it's truly good quality, encryption protocols, signaling process requirements, network compatibility, quality of service, and then bandwidth requirements for this. We're going to go over all of those in the next section, so I hope you'll join me for the entire presentation.